I broke into the sport for development field as a graduate student. I had the amazing opportunity to be involved in a cross-cultural exchange program that was sponsored by the US Department of State, actually. And we had the opportunity to go to the country of Belize in Central America. And we were using sport as a tool for teaching coaches and teachers youth development strategies, so how to build life skills through sport. And so here I am, this hungry graduate student with these really lofty aspirations of sort of changing lives, sort of that global north attitude that exists, unfortunately. And I was completely unprepared for actually the impact it had on me versus the impact I had on anyone else. Small things from showing up to the presentation I was supposed to give on the first day with this sort of flashy technology presentation and entering a room that did not even have an ounce of technology in it and having to, keep a group engaged for 2 hours and it going okay because of sort of the relationship aspects and the connection with people. And so that was a pretty influential experience on my life that has very much impacted the trajectory of my career so far. I chose the Journal of Sport for Development as an outlet for my research because it definitely has a demonstrated sort of rigorous track record of producing quality research. But an element that I really appreciate is it caters to practitioners as well. I always appreciate being able to read sort of the rich depth of program descriptions that come into many of the articles. And I find myself not just reading these articles for, constructing a literature review, but oftentimes out of interest or to hear how different programs navigated challenges. So I think it really achieves balancing that practical and research-oriented approach. And I also really do appreciate that it's freely available to the public because it really sort of walks the talk with, helping support countries that maybe couldn't afford, subscriptions to journals like this. And these are the countries that oftentimes are on the receiving end of the programs that we're doing. So I think it just has a really strong mission overall. I would characterize my research and sport for development efforts to date sort of in the field of using sport as a tool for developing psychosocial skills. I particularly work with or have an emphasis on marginalized youth. So I've researched and evaluated sort of after school programs in sort of more high-risk populations. I've worked with adolescent females who experience bullying. And in the last couple of years, the focus of my work has been on incarcerated youth. So of course, one of the most vulnerable and highly isolated groups in our society. And I've been looking at how sport and physical activity can be sort of a rehabilitative tool for youth who are incarcerated. Does that have any sort of impact on life while in prison, but then potentially after prison as well? And it's been sort of a whirlwind of an experience working in that population, but definitely really deepening my understanding of sort of the cross-cultural aspect. And even though this prison is in an area where I'm from, it is very much a cross-cultural experience. An area of sport for development that I hope to explore further is something around the unintended long-term benefits of sport for development partnerships, sort of for all stakeholders and all parties involved. This is sort of a deeply personal topic that I've seen play out in my life. So I mentioned I've been a part of Belize cross-cultural experience as a graduate student, and that was started around 7 years ago. And even now, I'm still collaborating with this country outside of the parameters of our original project. And it's even sort of blossomed into some long-term friendships. So one of our partners named Kaya Katus, who attended our program just as a participant the first year, is now one of my close friends. She comes and spends every summer in Chicago because she's an elite athlete as well. And so she competes and she stays at my house with my family. And we've seen just some amazing things happening with her. She's now an elected official in her country on the platform of Sport for Social Change. Whereas, when we just first met her, she was just an aspiring athlete and coach. And so I think there's definitely something to be said about those long-term relationships and what happens sort of beyond the parameters of the formal program. An area of the sport for development field that needs a bit more attention, I think, is sort of the exploration of that global north attitude. I think researchers are constantly trying to understand the impact and the power dynamics that has in programming. And it's, sort of an uglier side of it because nobody wants to admit that they have these implicit or explicit biases that just really sort of disrupt positive programming. But it's definitely something that should be continued to sort of be explored, acknowledged, and sort of worked against. And there are some really great researchers doing that. The advice I would give to early career scholars in the sport for development field is to get involved in cross-cultural experiences as much as possible. That may seem like a daunting task, like you have to, receive a grant and have sort of a large amount of external funding to do, but you'd be surprised. You can really look into, colleagues at your university or your institution who are doing any sort of international work. And what's incredible about the sport field is sport and physical activity can fold so nicely into any sort of topic area. So even if it's like a physics researcher or, somebody in the health sciences, there's often a space for sport and physical activity to sort of collaborate with whatever programming is going on. And so if you can sort of find a pathway into working in some sort of cross-cultural context, once you're involved, my advice is to just reflect on everything. Keep a journal, record your thoughts, ask questions, really try to be a student of the field. I think that we forget as researchers that we're learning. We're not necessarily imparting knowledge or being experts. We're trying to learn from others. So especially really committing to fostering a balanced relationship with people in these programs where you're committing to learning as much as you're intending to impart on them is really crucial. In the future of sport for development, I hope to see, I see positive things coming. I think there's going to be maybe more of a social justice focus. I think as we navigate a world pandemic, we're understanding this commonality that we all share, that each of our societies have sort of inherent inequities or social justices or inequalities that have a variety of solutions that we can look to. And amazingly, one of those solutions is sport, is physical activity. There's sort of this commonality of sport being this language that we can all speak or all play. And so if there's a way to maximize connection through sport or relating to one another through sport, I think there's potential for positive change. And I see that in the future of sport for development. My favorite sport for development project is one of my own, but I'm very proud of it because I didn't play a huge role in it. So this past year in 2020, just while the pandemic hit, but we happened to be in another country, so we made it work. We hosted a national women's sports summit in the country of Belize, where I've had a long-term relationship with our partners there. And this was the first national event devoted to women's equity in sport that the country's ever had. And it was extremely well attended, both by males and females, both people inside and outside of the sport world. And something that, made it my favorite or makes it very special is number one, it was co-run with my partners in Belize. So we from day one conceptualized the idea together rather than, just the Americans coming there and bringing their sort of initiatives. And number two, all of the programming was delivered by my graduate students. So they conceptualized what are the sessions going to look like, from the morning icebreakers all the way to how do we have a really critical conversation about, the injustices for women in sport. So not only was that wonderful because I got to take a back seat and sit down and listen, but it was just amazing to watch a group of students go to a different country after months and months of preparation and, really immersing themselves in the culture as much as possible and delivering material that they're passionate about. So that project was very impactful on me, I think, for many reasons. It was sort of just an illustration of this long-term relationship we've had with this country, mixed in with a lot of fun. And of course, at the end of every day, we were playing some sport, whatever it was. There was a ball there and we were all just kind of enjoying what we were doing.